Hi everyone, Raphael Harry here, and you're listening to White Label American, a podcast where we hear stories from an immigrant or two, sometimes more. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Welcome to another episode of White Label American. Thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to give a shout out to everyone who's been on the front lines and making life easier for those of us who are still at home and going through these uneasy times. And shout out to all our people who are fighting for our rights with the Black Lives Matter movement. And everyone all over the world who's showing support, we appreciate you. Thank you. And thank you to those who are also showing support to the podcast, giving us likes and giving us 5 stars and writing reviews on iTunes and Stitcher. We appreciate that. You're helping us grow. Without that, we can't grow because we can't afford to be buying adverts right now. We're not there. We don't have that money yet. So thank you all. And without much further ado, jump to today's guest. Today's guest is Professor Shafi Ahmed, who is a surgeon, a teacher, a futurist, an innovator, an entrepreneur, an evangelist in augmented and virtual reality. He's a multiple-time Tedx speaker, an international keynote speaker, associate dean at Barts Medical School, and he's also a cancer surgeon at the Royal London and St. Bartholomew's hospitals. He's a dedicated trainer and associate dean at Barts Medical School who's been awarded the Silver Scalpel in 2015 as Best National Trainer in Surgery by the Royal College of Surgeons, top British Asian Star in Tech 2017 of British Bangladeshi of the Year. He's known for disrupting traditional medical school curriculum by launching Barts Medicine program. He's embedded in future technologies and entrepreneurship into the medical school. He's also the chairman and co-founder of the Global Innovation and New Technologies Conference in London. He's the chair of Webit, Bulgaria. And he's a man full of so many fantastic knowledge when it comes to medicine, the future, and the present. So I'm looking forward to this discussion and just from watching his videos and hearing from him for the first time at the Global Health Summit just blew my mind. And I was like, I have to reach out to this man and see if, he can come on the podcast. And he responded within a few minutes. To my surprise, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't even know. I don't even know what to do. I was way too excited. I lost my balance for a little bit. So thank you for joining us today, Shafi, and welcome on the pod.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for asking me to speak on your podcast. It's great to meet you, Raphael.
Thank you. So let's begin from the very beginning. So where were you born and what was your childhood like?
So I was born in Bangladesh. Actually, it was East Pakistan at the time, way back in 1969, Raphael. I'm getting on a bit now, of course. So, of course, after a couple of years, 1971, there was an independence war between East and West Pakistan. And East Pakistan became Bangladesh. So I was very young at the time. I was there in Bangladesh in the northeast parts of the country, in a place called Sylhet, which is one district, of course. And I was there until the age of 4. And in 1973, my father moved the whole family to London, where I've been ever since. My childhood was interesting. I was in the first 4 years because of relocation. I have no memories. But since I came to the UK, of course, I had fond memories. I had a happy childhood where our family was mother and father and 3 other siblings together, all growing up in the East End of London. So generally, it's a very happy upbringing and childhood. But there were some issues around, of course, the growing up in the East of London with racism, etc., which now we're seeing more of actually, and sort of rears its head again. Overall, we had a really happy childhood, and I have fond memories.
Okay. So, you have someone who is very dear to the podcast. Outside of the podcast, we call him, he's like the unofficial uncle of the podcast. And his episode took us to World War II and It was pre-colonial India, so that
Mm,
included Bangladesh and Pakistan, and the partition, and
of course.
so yeah. So don't worry about taking us back in age. I just had to bring that up to let you know that there's someone who holds the record when it comes to
Great.
age. But yeah, he's the unofficial uncle of the podcast, and yeah, he's yeah, his episode is like it's like opening a history channel when it comes to India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Yeah, anytime I talk to him, I'm like I have to prepare myself for like a 2 hour conversation, going all the way back. But it's always beautiful hearing about that part of the world. So, with that being said, what's your favorite childhood memory?
My favorite childhood memory, I think in those days, Rafa, whether it's because we're younger, we didn't understand the bigger world, there was a sense of freedom that we had. For example, when we were growing up, we could go out in the streets until late in the evening
Hmm.
and not worry about any kind of violence or any issues around that. For example, we could go to the park until it became dusk. We play effortlessly. There's that freedom of living, I guess, we saw. I mean, we used to play in the streets, for example, with no risks.
Yeah.
Parents were happy, etc. And so just that sense of freedom, well, that's just because you're younger and you didn't understand fear at the time, maybe, but it was just that sense of wonderment that you could just live your life and be happy, right? And that's what I remember about my young childhood. Of course, then as we get slightly older, it's about schooling and moving on with your friends and colleagues and having a kind of a community that's being built together from the kind of early 70s and pushing forward. So yeah, it was a great experience. And I said before, really happy memories generally of a childhood growing up in the 70s and 80s.
No, it's always interesting because I always ask that question to all my guests, and no matter where they were born, what part of the world, and the age or the era, it's that freedom always tends to come up. And
Mm,
I was born in Nigeria. I was born in the '80s, and most of my childhood, the problematic side, forget about the problematic side. When it comes to childhood, I remember running around playing the freedom. You don't really think because we all had that. I would say maybe a naivety, but the innocence was there. You
yeah,
didn't really know about the world, about everything happening. But as kids, there was no risk, there was no fear, like you said, and we just went out and played until your parents or family members start looking for you. Where are you? When are you gonna come home? They have to come drag you, literally drag you sometimes, like come back home
yes,
and.
of
But
course.
you just go out and play, and and it's funny how I've had guests from Angola, I've had guests from Ghana, I've had guests from, and everybody keeps saying the same thing. I've had guests from Myanmar. It's that or wanting to have that running around, and everybody has that. That it's a common thread that I always keep hearing, and that's one reason why I always like asking that question. And it's something that sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish, now my, that's, like I was telling you before we started the episode about taking my daughter out yesterday. It's something that I worry about, having my daughter grow up here. And, like, I don't know how I can have my daughter enjoy or recreate that kind of lifestyle because for kids now it's like in the concrete jungle. There's so much. I remember a family in, I think it was in Maryland, who got arrested because they practiced the free range parenting, and they let their kids just go out, be yourself. And people are like, what? Did they abandon their kids? What's going on? And then they called the police on them because people freaked out and like, why should children be walking on the streets? Why should children be walking by themselves? And these were not even, I think they were like 5 and 10 or something like that. And the parents and other people in the neighborhood just freaked out. And I was like, but a few years ago, that was normal. It's not like people just thought something bad is going to happen. It wasn't the normal assumption. But I guess that's where we are now, that everybody just freaks out. Even though we have more technology today that should be able to help with allowing kids move out. But someone has to be there. Someone has to be there chaperoning the kids, and people just freak out. And that's why I always like bringing that question up so people can hear. Maybe it will help people look back and say, yeah, we used to do this. Maybe why can't we do it again? So um, moving on from your childhood, so you spend most of your life in London,
All of my life,
all your life in London.
since I came in '73, we've lived in London for the entire duration of my life so far.
Oh, okay. So when did you start to when did you become attracted to medicine, or when was there something that happened that made you catch the bug or the attraction, or was there a role model or someone that inspired you to go into medicine?
Thanks for that question. And I guess the story really around my passion for medicine initially came from my parents. So look, we're a traditional Asian family growing up in London. I had an older brother and an older sister, and I was the third in the family. So my mother, of course, was a traditional Asian mother, and she sat us down one day and said to us directly, "Okay, I want one of you to become a lawyer, one to become an engineer, one to become a doctor. That's kind of my wish for you," which is like most Asian families. So my brother, who's the eldest, decided to become an engineer. So that took him out of the equation.
Okay.
My sister then became a lawyer. Now she's a judge in the UK. So actually, I was only left with one possibility in terms of my parents' aspirations. But thankfully, at the same time, I quite enjoyed science. And I really realized that I wanted to have an impact on the world. It's about helping mankind, saving people. My mother had diabetes, and both my parents had a lot of illnesses, heart disease, hypertension. They're both diabetic, for example, with chronic ailments. I always thought that the hardest thing to do would be do medicine to find cures for diabetes when you're young. I think going to cure the world, of course. And so it's a mixture of my parents' aspirations, my own aspirations, and I guess my own interests in being curious enough to discover what the world might throw upon us in terms of finding cures and treatments for various diseases affecting my own family, but also others. So it's a mixture. And of course, as a background in science, I was very strong on science and maths, for example, at school. It kind of made sense that all the kind of everything aligned properly to me to make that decision. I'm glad I made the choice. I was very passionate about a career in medicine.
That's good because it worked with your passion, so everything worked out. Because if you didn't have the passion, then it would have been there would have been a disruption in the negative way in your life. So
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So now that I brought up the word disruption, I think I would just ask this question. I wasn't supposed to go there this early, but did you were you the kind of student who disrupted early in his life? Was that the beginning of disrupting? Did that begin early in your life, or was that much later? Did that come later in your life?
So I think what I'm kind of known for is obviously disrupting both medical education, which we'll talk about later, and also surgery as a whole and the future of medicine. But obviously, when you qualify as a doctor during medical school years and you're training, there's a conformist attitude. You have to go through certain barriers that everyone else has to go through, and it's very much you have to be single-mindedly focused to become an expert. For example, in my case, as a cancer surgeon, there's no question there's that linear pathway that you choose. In spite of that, I always questioned things. I always did different things. I was trying to experiment with new techniques, for example, during my career, new operations, maybe learning new ideas, traveling a little bit. So I was always inquisitive about where the world would take us and how we could change fundamentally for the better. I realized that what we were doing could always be challenged, and actually there's always new ways of thinking. So I think I had that the creative part of me. There's always thinking how to redefine what we're doing in terms of work, experience, and how you manage patients, for example, how we educate people. And so that's always in the back end. But it didn't really flourish until I really had the opportunity as a senior surgeon to now use my experience and my reach, as well as having the necessary technology available to be able to disrupt fully. But I think I was always a bit disruptive. Medical school, when I was an undergraduate studying medicine, I was the president of the student union. Even then, I realized that we could change the curriculum. And my role there, even when I was quite young, I actually brought in ethics into the curriculum for the first time, because ethics and law wasn't delivered at medical school in the UK. It was a new entity. We hadn't thought about it properly. This was back in 87, 88 kind of thing. And so we introduced that, and I led that path, so introduced something different to the curriculum to allow us to make more rational choices around legal framework and understand it better, to make us better doctors. So even at a young age, I'm still realizing that actually we need to change, evolve, move on, bring different disciplines into the medical school curriculum. So I guess that's when the seeds were sown in terms of my younger medical career.
So I'm still going to go a little bit back because there are things that I look back on today and I'm like, wow, the threads, I can see the threads being laid in my life. Like because I used to be in the Navy, and when I joined the Navy, some people that I've met in the Navy or after my time in the Navy, they always like, oh, I discovered I could become a leader while I was in the Navy, but I realized that we all had it in us to be leaders. We just got the opportunity, or we got the backing while we're in the military. That's the only difference. But if we look back in our lives, there were things that we did while we're much younger that showed our
Yeah,
leadership traits.
yeah,
And just based on our environments or where we were raised or how we're raised or where we're from, we may not have had the right language to have that described as leadership, or in your case, the disruption. So looking back, going back a little bit
mm.
further, uh, can you pick one example of something
Um,
that you see as, oh, this is one moment much earlier in your life that was the beginning of the disruption, or you could just say, oh, that's one of the disruptions, not
yeah.
even way before medical school.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it's a really sensible suggestion that you've made. When you look back on your life, there are those little um, things that kind of converge later on. I think, okay, actually, that kind of does make sense. Let's go back a few years. So if you looked at me now, you wouldn't think I was any good at sports. I put a bit weight, a bit older.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I was very sporty. And I would like to think I was good at some sports. I was a really passionate soccer player and cricket player. And I used to play all sports, everything that was under the sun. And I was actually gifted, I think, in those days. I used to captain those teams. So at a young age, in those days, I used to captain virtually every school team. I used to play for the district and the more national level. I used to play professional football, for example. So
Oh,
what I learned from that was as you progress, you become leaders. I was a captain. I learned how to manage and lead from a very young age. I guess that's where it started from, the fact that you had the reputation that you could lead, that you had the skills required to manage people at a young age. And also, as you progress, that breeds success.
yeah.
Kind of success breeds success, right? So you've seen it, you moved on. And what I always assumed, I would never settle for what I was getting. I always wanted more. What's the next big step? What's the next achievement? Where can I go with this? Not because it was about personal gratitude. Is what can I leave behind? What's my role in the world? What can I do to push myself? Look, we came from a very poor family. We weren't particularly wealthy. We came from just a lower middle income family, for example. Not huge aspirations at the time. Our community, for example, were based around restaurants, restaurant trade in England. We all ran restaurants, worked as waiters, etc. And I used to work as a waiter, for example, in a restaurant when I was 14, 15 years of age. Like a lot of people do, work at a young age to help their family support them, okay? So you realize the hardship you have to come across. You realize the hardship your parents have put in to come to another country, that kind of age, raise a family in a different environment. That's inherently racist at the time. A lot of barriers for us in those days. And you realize that the things that people gave up and the kind of sacrifices made. And for you, it was okay, how do I move on? This is difficult for all of us. Where do I get my passion from? Where do I move on? What's my role here? How do I move away from this so that I can push myself to a new level? And that was a constant drive of my life. I guess it showed that you had the drive, the ambition, you had probably the ability, which came as a consequence. As you're more successful in having leadership roles, it kind of became a snowball effect that you could keep pushing, despite the boundaries, despite the glass ceilings that we both face right now in our
Yeah.
life because of society. I think that's a mixture of kind of what now you're asking me is going backwards. Actually, all those parts fundamentally change who I am. and brought me to my point today. And I remember that back then. I remember the hardship that my parents and I had when we were younger, to be able to, there's my whole vision is around making health and life more equitable for many more people around the world. Hence, I have a passion for global health, connecting people, and leaving that legacy. So I'm sure the two somehow are joined together over the course of decades, of course.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Sometimes we we take for granted how far we've come, and that's why I always like try to throw that question in there, like and remind myself. It's also for myself too, along with the audience, and and people look back. I'm like, oh wow, I never knew I had this or been through this, and it's just a little reminder, and because I remember the first time someone pointed out to me, because I tend to sell myself short every now and then, because you told in the name of staying humble, we kind of forget that in trying to, like, I was looking for a job then, and in a way you still have to toot your horn. You have to show what you're good at, and then but if you're saying like you kind of look like you don't have the qualifications, who's going to give you the job? Yes, there's racism and all that, but at the same time, if you just sound like you don't have anything to offer, then how they going to offer you anything? And the person I was talking to was like, "Tell me about what you've done," and I started listening, and the person was like, "Wow, you qualify for this and that," and I started listening, and I was like, "Wait, you know what? That's true." That's like looking back, I was like, "Wait, I've done this," and I was managing. I coached my high school team when I was 16, 17, and because they couldn't afford a coach. And I volunteered to coach the team when I was coaching boys who were much bigger than myself. And how was I able to do that? I just felt like doing it, and I did it. And when I tell people that, they're like, "Oh, so you didn't wait until you were in the Navy, until you moved to the United States almost 7 years later, and then took charge of people?" And I was like, "No, I did that." And then when I moved to America, and the first time I was put in charge of people, I freaked out because I was afraid. But you had certain things already in you that you've done in the past that well, why are you now freaking out? It's like you already had it. You've done it in much tougher environments, and I was like, "Oh yeah, 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 I already took charge of people in much tougher places where I had no title attached to me. Nobody gave me the recognition, but I did it. So so that
Good for
person was
you.
like, "Yeah, you can have all that in your resume, and you can tell your story with that." I was like, "Oh, oh, oh, you know what? Wow, that changes." And yeah, so now I had to like relate that to my niece when she was looking for a job, and she was like, "Oh, you mean?" I said, "Yes, you have a shot," because the job she wanted to apply for asked for 10 years of experience. I said, "You have more than 10 years of experience." She said, "But I just graduated from college." I said, "You have more than 10 years of experience. Let me list everything down for you." And I did that, and she was like, "Oh, wow." I said, "Yes, now you know." They don't tell you that, but
Okay.
now you found out the secret. Oh. So now let's step away from the world of medicine. Well, I believe you still use some of this, but are you a man of music?
Yes, so I am a man. Well, I'm a man of music in the sense that I love listening to music. I'm a passionate music fan. I can't play any musical instruments. I'm just useless. That's the first thing.
I think a lot of
When I
us
was
are like
younger, I,
that.
I had lessons with the violin and guitar, and I was hopeless. Clearly, never meant to be a musician. But in terms of when I was younger, let's go with the young story. I was growing up in the 80s. I was really much into the 80s music scene. I found my solace in that world in music. I spent all my life listening to music, going to concerts constantly when I was about 15 years of age, disappearing from home the whole evening. And parents trying to find where I was, and they could find me at the local concert, watching some concert either with various groups of the 80s. So I remember a great story. I remember, so there's two stories. One is that I was a passionate U2 fan, and also around the new music scene, in those days, the indie music scene.
Yep.
And I went to all the U2 concerts when they came out back in the days of War, the album, and then the Unforgettable Fire, when they released that. And one of the things I was sharing with my son the other day was that I actually went to Live Aid, the concert. Do you remember the Live
Oh
Aid concert?
wow. Yeah.
I was there. I was one of the very few people who actually get tickets.
Wow.
The story was, I actually, it was coming out, and we were passionate. and I actually had my exams coming up. My what's called OLA was at the time, the kind of the senior school
Yeah.
exams. And I this is a story which I wouldn't share too widely, but I almost missed my French exam. So I decided to go to Wembley Stadium, queue up for the tickets. They were like in short supply. Managed to get the ticket in time, a 3 or 4 hour wait on the queue. Ran back, got the train, and just spent my French exam with about 10 minutes to spare. And so I didn't get a good grade, but I wasn't too fast because I got the ticket to Live Aid. So my friends and I went to Live Aid, and I was watching the film the other day with Freddie Mercury's story with my son, and I showed my ticket of Live Aid and my T-shirt, obviously doesn't fit me anymore, and he was so impressed. My kids don't get impressed by anything that I do, but that was like, hey, Dad, you're cool. You went to Live Aid, right? so yeah, I've gone up a few notches in their minds just by sheer fluke.
Oh wow. Oh man, that's beautiful. Wow. Okay, that makes that concert extra special. Now, I'll be like, oh, I know someone who attended that concert. Yeah, I can say that now.
You can, yeah.
What about music from Bangladesh? Do you have any? Are you into that too?
Not really. So there's a slight disconnect because I've lived in the UK virtually all my life. I'm essentially British, right? British
Yeah.
Bangladeshi, I guess. There's been no real connection. We used to watch, of course, Indian movies, like most people do from around the world, and watch the Hindi movies and the Bollywood movies. So some of those songs resonated when we were younger. I still listen to a few of those. I don't really have a favorite artist or such from India or Bangladesh, apart from the classical singers like Lata Mangeshkar and those kind of singers who obviously sang many thousands of tunes that we all listened to when growing up. But currently, I don't really have that much. My music taste is quite diverse, from opera to classical music to punk music to even boy band music. I really don't mind. I'm actually okay whether it's Westlife or whether it's Puccini. I'm very eclectic in my musical taste,
Yeah.
so it's fairly broad. But sadly, I don't really have as much knowledge of the Asian music scene as perhaps maybe I should have. It's just because we've been in this country all our lives, and I've not had time either to find those and discover those bands.
Well, I know the Bollywood was the main export to Nigeria. So like every Friday was like Bollywood night. On back then we only had the state and national TV stations, and it was like movie night was Bollywood. That was it. You had no choice. So those are the only options. It was Bollywood,
So,
and
so what was your favorite song from the Indian? Can you remember any?
I can't. As soon as we were able to afford cable TV and you had options, yeah, I stopped watching. But yeah, for a long time we watched lots of Bollywood. Like it's still huge right now. It's still huge in Nigeria. I think they finally had. If I'm not mistaken, I think there was earlier this year. There was. I think someone finally. I think the two industries, the Nollywood and Bollywood, finally decided to collaborate and make a movie together.
Oh,
And
great.
yeah, because I've been thinking about, well, why have none of them, thought about it? Like you two are like two big industries on your own, and you guys
Yeah.
can connect. You're outside of Hollywood, and you guys should be connecting. And these are things that should have been happening years back. And I know I saw the headline. I don't know if they've shot the movie or they were about to begin production or something, but yeah, it was just weird because you see Nigerians like, oh, they love Bollywood, they know all the stars, but I think most of the boys started like separating as soon as we had like the Premiership. We could watch Premiership, and yeah, we had
Yeah.
cable. That's what came as soon as cable TV became affordable. Then the
Yeah.
Premiership took off, and everybody's like, "Oh, we're watching Premiership. That's for the women." But you find the guys who, like when nobody's around, the guy's watching his Bollywood movie, he knows all the stars. Like yeah, but he's hiding in the shadows watching. But it's for the women. It's for the women, and yeah, but women will openly talk about Bollywood movies, kind of thing. And
But
then
then they call the film scene in Nigeria Nollywood. Is
yes,
that what they call it? Is that
yes.
right? So a mixture
Uh,
of Nollywood and Bollywood. What do you call it? That mixture
oh, that
between
would be
Bollywood and
interesting.
Nollywood. I'll think of a name.
That would have to be Bonwood, or I don't know. That would have to be a combination.
Yeah,
Maybe I have to go
exactly.
copyright that or trademark it.
Yeah,
before
why not?
someone
Why not?
does. Oh yeah. So now that we've mentioned music, let's jump into food. What's your favorite cuisine?
So, my favorite cuisine is obviously Indian food. That's kind of obviously our staple diet. But in Indian food itself, my passion was really heavy. It's prawns, king prawns. So,
Hmm.
with cooked it with Indian spices. So king prawn bunna we call it, or even with rice called a king prawn biryani. I have very much a soft spot a king prawn generally. And actually, over this over this kind of pandemic, once we've been in for 3 months, I've really nurtured my culinary skills. I've been practicing and learning, and I can virtually cook anything, whether it's
Wow.
Italian, whether it's Chinese and Indian. In fact, one of the things I might do, this is something I want to do at some stage, is have a small YouTube channel and just have 10 dishes I cook for anybody who wants to learn from scratch, from being basic. People like me who haven't been particularly good in the past. And I desperately want to create that small YouTube channel, just 10 of my favorite dishes and share
Okay.
it with everybody. So watch out for that. When I get time, I'll do it, right? So king prawn, then shape with spices, chilies, either with a sauce, with bunna, or with the rice mixed with biryani. And
Oh,
honestly, I'm in heaven. I'm okay with that.
I'll look forward to that because I think that's something I would definitely like to cook too. Because yeah, I eat everything, and I don't think I think I've tried to make masala once. I don't think it came out good, but yeah, I don't think I've tried.
It's really easy, Raphael. That's the whole point. It's so simple. It's really easy. So I will teach you.
Okay.
That's my on a Zoom call one day. We'll do that rather than podcast.
Oh man. Well, I made coconut rice yesterday, and
Okay.
um, I discovered that India has this coconut rice and Nigeria has this coconut rice, and I'm like, wow, I have to check the Indian recipe to see what's the difference between Indian coconut rice and
Mm.
Nigerian. And I've also had someone born in Dhaka. Is it pronounced Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh?
Dhaka, yeah,
Dhaka,
yes,
yes. I try not to mix it with the Senegal capital.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
he said a lot of Bangladeshi cuisine is riverine,
Yeah,
and so I've forgotten what he called his favorite, and his favorite is more of the riverine cuisine.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I
Spain,
I was thinking
it's
yours,
mainly fish.
yeah,
Yeah,
fishes, yeah. So
it's mainly fish.
yeah, so I was waiting to see if yours would be on that route too. So
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 I do like fish. I do like fish, and that's a staple diet for Bangladesh.
mhm,
Actually, rice and fish is our staple diet,
yeah.
and I do like the fish, of course, but we don't actually access as much as here we should do. So the king prawns for me is still sea based. It's still fish.
Okay.
Go with it. So it works quite well, right?
Yeah, it's a good sub. Because I don't want someone to say, "Oh, he betrayed. He's a, he betrayed the culture. He's no longer one of us." You know, I'm like,
Of
uh
course.
oh, we don't want that happening. All right. So now let's jump back to medicine.
Yeah,
So
sure.
with this pandemic going on, I think this pandemic has brought a lot of things that people have taken for granted to the forefront. But at the same time, it's shown that we've had solutions to problems that have already been that have been available, but just not on, I'll say, on a wide scale, or people just haven't been aware,
Mhm.
or should I say, have taken for granted, or maybe let's say, look, due to misconceptions, people have been like, "Oh, we couldn't do this or use this." So,
Yeah,
stepping out of medicine, I'll say, well, it's still part of medicine, in my opinion. So, let's say, take the social problem of like homelessness. You know, in most
yeah,
places, we were like, "Oh, we couldn't. You know, we don't have money to take care of the homeless. Problem is too expensive and all that." But as soon as the pandemic came up, in the Western world, most governments found solutions to take care of the homeless situation. So if I'm taking that um, problem and applying it to the use of technology in medicine, and asking why can't that be applied to the poorer communities in
Mm.
most of the wealthier countries? Like, why should poorer communities still have problems with access to healthcare when healthcare should be a right for all? It should be a human. It's a human right. It shouldn't be for profit or loss.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. And um, I, I wonder, like, how do you feel about this pandemic exposing, bringing to the light the problems that um, governments in the Western world have put healthcare to the back of priorities until a problem like this came up.
Yes, it's a really good question. Let me see if I can summarize my thoughts around that. There's quite a few pieces
Yeah.
to put it together. So, the first of all, if you look at the pandemic, I always describe this as a global pandemic requiring global solutions. Okay, and that's been missing from the table a little bit. If you think about the World Health Organization, the experiences we've had already with Ebola, with MERS and SARS before in China, in South Korea, in Singapore, and Africa, for example, the Ebola, we haven't learned from experiences, and that's been a shame. We should have learned straight away what other countries did to manage a pandemic, how they created infrastructure, how they use tech innovation, and we all try to do the same thing again, individual countries. And that's a shame. I hope one day when we go forward, we can reflect back and say, actually, the world needs to work much better together to create healthcare system that's much more fairer, to learn from shared experiences. That's kind of the global problem, I think, will force us to think differently going forward. What the pandemic has done, though, Raphael, it's because it's been an emergency and we've had to make new changes. Everything has moved on. So, for example, in the last 3 months, I'd say there's been a compression of time. So, for example, what we're planning on doing over 2 to 5 years, bringing in technology and innovation, whatever it is, which have been difficult with barriers, etc., suddenly it's been compressed to 3 months, and we're now doing these things. We talk about for many years. I'm a futurist. Talk about the future of healthcare and how we're going to manage it. Let's take an example: telemedicine. So, this kind of way we're connecting now through Zoom,
Yes.
how we conduct our consultations. Now, it was getting to be popular last year, and now it's exploded. So, in the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, the telemedicine consultations went up by 2,000%. Now it's a 5,000%. We now are doing only virtual clinics. So suddenly, because of this pandemic, it's pushed, it's springboarded, it's accelerated the change required to manage healthcare differently. So what does that mean going forward? So it means actually we can make healthcare more equitable. Yeah, accessing people remotely by connecting people, right? Whether it's a 3G, 4G connection with a smartphone, using data, for example, and data-driven healthcare, we can now explore how healthcare could be accessed. The other thing that, as you've said before, the pandemic has highlighted is the gross inequalities of healthcare and social inequity. We've seen people being affected largely have been from poor backgrounds, from the workers at the front line, for example, right? We've seen that actually divide that's been very visible. So what we've seen, I was part of various groups and things, looking at the data around BAME deaths, for example, Black and ethnic minority and people who are at the front line who died disproportionately to Caucasian people, and also the access to healthcare. What came through those reports is inequality of health, lack of housing, lack of income, jobs on the front line, the menial jobs to make the country work, for example. You see that divide being more expressed by the sheer inadequacy of how the pandemic's affected different people, right? Yeah. So all those levels now have come in technology, innovation, people's mindsets have changed. We changed people's mind about fast-track healthcare, different way we manage healthcare. And also, of course, the divide that's been there historically. So I think there's some things that have been uncovered, and also to be positive, to make a change much more quicker than we were experiencing before.
Thank you for that. Also, do you see the possibility of going along? I take it as a positive, although some may not see it that way. But to me, I think there's a positive. There's an opportunity here for the Western world and the Eastern world, and everybody, or the whole world, to also uh, embrace not just only the one side when it comes to medicine. Let me rephrase the question. How do you see technology or the future, the blend of technology with traditional medicine from indigenous people going forward?
So that's a good question. So look, one thing let's talk about technology. Technology isn't the only solution. Technology is an enabler. It supports, it augments our work. That's the key. Healthcare is still about people, relationships, patients, doctors, etc., and healthcare workers. Technology will enable us to do better, more efficiently, make our lives easier, and improve the outcomes of our patients. That's the key parameter. So technology has the ability now to make those gross changes. So going back a few years, if we go back about 4 years, Raphael, Klaus Schwab, who's the World Economic Forum chairman, came out with a statement around the fourth industrial revolution, okay? The fourth industrial age, which we now call health 4.0. It's a concept of these technologies being available at the same point of human existence. So we're talking about many technologies, right? Like artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality, nanobiotechnology, genomics, wearable sensors, big data, many things. And what we've got at the moment is probably the most wonderful time to be alive in medicine. We've never had such riches of technology converging at the same point of human existence to make a big impact. Yeah, this wasn't 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's today. So we have the opportunity. We've seen how it's driven the pandemic, how we change our mindset around it. That's the beauty of where we are. So technology in the future will be enabling us to make healthcare, as you said, more accessible, more affordable, and ultimately more equitable. That's what we want. So how do we use that as a global understanding to provide those global solutions I talked about earlier? It won't be easy. We'll still have to navigate through barriers, through geographic, geopolitical borders, of course. We know that. And of course, the cost is going to be a problem. And cost is an issue. The GDP is going up year on year, Raphael.
Yeah.
We can't afford healthcare as it is. We've got to change it, reimagine healthcare. It's got to be different. You can't carry on endlessly the same thing over and over again and learn by our previous models about where we go forward. So we've got an opportunity now in these few months, 6 months, new window opportunity to redesign, rethink, reimagine what health could look like for everybody in the world. And my job as I've the last 4 or 5 years is to bring that passion to the greater world, to show what can be achieved by using these kind of new ideas. It's not just about technology. It's about putting innovation. It's about putting innovation into the heart of every organization, into the heart of every person in healthcare. So once we've done that, then we can all think about how we redesign, repurpose every pathway to improve the outcomes. So this is the opportunity that we have. This is the thing I think we should be thinking about. And this is the positive step to come out of this pandemic, despite the misery and death it's created around the world. Actually, it's a sign for us to springboard, to accelerate, to push on, to improve the health and lives of many.
Thank you for that. Um, you've been to quite a few countries, and you've given lectures to students and professionals in the healthcare space from all over the world. Um, can you share one of your where have you been to that? Where have you what experience like stands out to you from places you've been to?
Sure. So let me give you an example. So look, over the last 3 or 4 years, I've been to over 30 countries, working with governments, working with colleges, universities, with surgeons, healthcare workers to, again, think about how we can support them and how technology might enable a better healthcare system to be developed. So the one example I'll give you is Gaza in Palestine. So I've been to Gaza for the last 5 years. Following the war of 2014, I was invited by the Ministry of Health and a charity organization, an NGO called Medical Aid for Palestinians, who asked me to go to West Bank and Gaza just after the last war, a conflict zone, to write a report, a comprehensive report on how we improve surgical standards across both parts. And so I visited universities, colleges, met with the hospital directors, the doctors, etc. How could we help support a program of learning and training and to help support their programs going forward? I've now been on about 10 trips, supporting our project that I designed and supported with it, with funding. And phase 1 is finished. We put in training for surgeons. We put in training for junior doctors. We put courses in, and we've made it such that it was we left them with a legacy so that it was self-sustainable. Not for us, it's for them to manage, train, understand the principles, and to do it individually. And I left legacy now for long term. We're now at phase 2 this year, and that's to train people into cancer surgery. Some of the people in Gaza can't leave. It's difficult to get a permit to go outside the country, and therefore they have to promote within and get training. They can't leave and get trained. So we've been back a few times to train the specialists and to ensure that we leave a legacy so they can actually now have the skills to do advanced keyhole surgery for patients with bowel cancer, for example. And unfortunately, the last 2 visits have been cancelled because of the pandemic. Yeah. It's another 3-year program. And next Sunday, we're going to be doing the first what's called a multidisciplinary team meeting through Zoom. So we connect with their specialists, with people in the UK and abroad, to ensure that we share learning and allow them to share cases that we can help support and give advice on. So we're moving to this virtual world, creating an infrastructure of learning and supporting them so they have a self-sustainable model of care, which is world-class and gold standard, which is what everybody wants. Yeah. So I learned a lot from working over 5 years in running a project, dealing with it, and then seeing where the results were going to take us in the future. And I'll be going back many times in the future, of course, to continue that work.
So for a futurist like you, an educator, an innovator, you're going around the world, and you love helping people, you're passionate about it, and pandemic aside, how do you relax?
Really good question. So I still play some sports occasionally, a bit of football with my brothers, just a bit of soccer. So we still do that. I still listen to a bit of music. And I guess the other thing passion I have often with my 2 children now, who are now 17 and 16, we spend a lot of time together, of course, and now they get a bit older. We play Scrabble every night at the moment. We have a competition, and they're very much into Scrabble and Risk and those kind of games. So there's a huge competitive element in our family. So it's really spending time with the family, try and take time out and relax. Yeah. I enjoy cooking, of course, mentioned earlier, learning how to cook. So I'm just taking new skills and learning how we, and just taking new skills on and spending time with family, I guess.
That's good. That's good. That's good. So when you play Scrabble with your kids, who wins most of the time?
well. Sadly, I thought I was much better than they were. And initially, of course, because of experience and perhaps a little bit better, and the fact that you can play the game in a more clever sense, they've learned all the tricks. So sadly, they're leaving their father way behind. They've learned how to cheat. They've learned how to pull words out of the bag, learn words that you've never heard of before. Using those 2-letter words that you don't think exist. They're pretty good. So that they've moved on, and sadly, their father's been well left behind now.
Maybe you have to challenge them at the cooking. You have to create a cooking competition now and then. Be like, all right, only the meals that you cook that you challenge them to. You don't challenge them to anything else.
we should.
Oh, that's beautiful, man. Oh man. Wow. So so you've also performed surgeries while being recorded and watched by people not only in your not only by students or professionals in your vicinity, but also virtually around the world. So did you feel different while that was going on? Like the first time that happened, did you have a weird feeling, or how did that feel?
Yes, so that's a really good question. So for the audience, just a quick summary and tell you how I felt. I have experimented with teaching many people, because the background is that I've been teaching surgery for a long while. And often you have maybe 2 or 3 medical students in the operating theatre, operating room with you, maybe a few trainees. But my view is, how do I share that knowledge on a much more global scale? How do people experience what I've learned from and leave that legacy? So initially, I used Google Glass back in 2014. I used virtual reality 2016, the first world operations using those modalities. And the world's first operation on Snapchat, first one on Twitter. And also I did operation live on TV on Channel 5, one of the main stations on the UK. We did a live operation for 2 hours to the public, which
Wow.
actually was shortlisted for a BAFTA award last year, and I was at the BAFTAs because of that. So I've
Wow.
experimented with all of these things, and it's pushed that whole agenda to millions of people where they connect with different platforms. The first time I did go back to the story is Google Glass. When that came out back in 2012, 13, in 2014, I decided to do live stream with that. So this was a Google Glass. Obviously, it's a wearable tech on your head, which you can look through and share the images and videos that you're seeing with your points of view and share it to a wider audience on their smartphones or whatever they're looking at. So you can share experience. What they allowed people to do was actually watch the operation on their smartphone anywhere in the world. They could text a message like you normally text your friend. That text would come up my glass in the corner as I was watching doing the operation and answering at the same time, interacting with many people. And that first
Wow.
time I did it, I taught 14,000 people across the world, right, on that single operation, which was a cancer surgery. So the experience is this really. People worry about the risks involved because you're not concentrating.
Yeah.
Are you alert enough? Are you distracted? But the first thing about surgery is that when you start an operation, you're in a zone. You're so focused on what's going on. Yeah, that's the word just kind of disappears. And these operations I was doing were routine. I did them every time. And I always talk to my trainees. I'm training people constantly. What was happening there? I was training many more people rather than a few. Yeah. So after the first one, which was a bit nerve-wracking when I first did it, went through it many times, ensured there's no risk for the patient, consent was obtained properly, we took all the precautions in case it went wrong. After that, it just became normal for me. It was just elevating and teaching more people. And it became very comfortable, very easy, and routine for us. So it never became a problem after that. The first time, it was just a bit nerve-wracking. And I think, okay, I have to do this correctly. Thankfully, it all went well. There was no risk for the patient. And after that, I realized how to do these things, how to overcome some of the issues that people might conceive to be a problem, to ensure that patient's dignity was respected, that
Yes.
there was no risk for the patient, that we're managing expectations. And the whole hospital supported my innovation ideas over the course of the last 5 years. So, yeah, so it's been an interesting journey.
Wow. Wow. That would have. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of something like that being possible because I think when the Google Glass came out, I think I just saw the negative um, reactions to it, and it took my reading. There was an article on Dr. Raphael Grossman's website that someone was talking about his experience using the Google Glass on New York Times that featured Dr. Raphael, and that's when I realized that wait a minute, I'll just expose myself to just the negative. Then, so like my brain was just wired to never think about any other possibilities with the glass, and or any other. I didn't hear about any other person's experience. Just it was just complaints that I just the first like five things I heard were complaints, and I was like, nope, yeah, it's not safe.
Yeah.
And
I
then
think, I think, Raphael, I think the problem with the Google Glass when it came out, I'll share this with you, it was too ahead of its time.
mm,
Even now, we're
yep,
still not ready for having wearable technology, yeah, regularly, having the intrusion perhaps of a video glass on your head, etc. So that society hasn't really been ready for it. And also, we were seeing the negative stories you described. We weren't sharing the positive experiences. The media
yeah,
only covered the negative aspects of intrusion, yeah, of people not having um, uh, people looking at things and videoing things that they perhaps shouldn't have done. So, because the negative aspects of it, which is highlighted by the media, we never saw the good story. But my story was covered globally by every newspaper, by Time magazine, etc. So actually, there were some good things come out of it, but we weren't seeing the mass adoption. I just think personally, the site wasn't ready for it. We weren't ready as a society. Our mindset
yeah,
wasn't ready. Maybe in 5 years' time, you'll see everyone wearing small glasses with connectivity, with Google Maps on it to navigate through the streets, which is an advantage. But society, I think the pandemic might help us again push on and make that much more relevant going forward.
yeah. But it's what I found out too from reading that article because the article also pointed out to people who had try to use wearable technology a lot earlier in the 90s, and their experiences. And there was a gentleman who had one, I think, in Stanford, what Stanford, I mean, and cops were called on him, and they always, like, every time he wore it, he always kept getting arrested. And he was just wearing it to classes. He was like, why do I need to take notes all the time when I can record my classes? That was his main reason for inventing one, and it was quite smart. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And but that was the reason why he did it. And they interviewed him, and I was like, wow, if I'd read something like this. And then, now that you
Yeah.
mentioned that your surgery was broadcast on Snapchat, I was like, wait a minute. Most people, when they complain about Snapchat, they're like, oh man, teenagers use this app for God knows what. It's complain. And I'm like, you've never heard anyone say, oh, there was a surgery broadcast on Snapchat. Nobody talks about that. Nobody mentions the other possibilities that apps like that can be used for. It's always, oh, I don't want too much videos. They only just focus on one side. And so it brings me to something that my uncle, my late uncle, used to say. Anytime we watched movies, and there was always a medical, there was a futuristic portrayal of a scientist in the movie, and he was like, "Oh, these scientists and their experiments, don't they learn from that movie? It led to a destruction of the world, or the bad guys. No." And because he was always voicing his opinions before the movie was over. He was that kind of guy. And but there are people who, just based on media, just adopt that negative mindset, like, oh, no, nothing good can come out. The world will be destroyed, and don't realize that there's so many solutions that we already have to problems that have been invented or are being invented through technology. But it's just like, oh, my experience, or the very first experience I've had with anything technology or something from technology, was bad. So, or the first thing I read was bad. So nothing good can come out. Everything is just straight up bad. Or and they don't realize that if only bad people have technology, then only bad you hear of. Or if only the negatives, it's just all. But how about the positive, the good guys using it for something that it's meant to be
Yeah.
used for? And we don't think about that. We don't ever go that route, or publicize that route enough. And when we start doing that, and then we're like, oh wait, take a pause and um, consider something like that. And that's another reason why I was glad to have you on the podcast to talk on stuff like that, because it's something that I had to change myself, because my mindset, like I said earlier, was like, oh, I also used to think like that too, and think from only one point of view, like, oh, everything was just negative. And then started realizing, like, wait a minute, did I ever consider that the Google glasses was not made for just this? It wasn't.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. That's great. So how do you so what are your plans for the post pandemic space in for the healthcare space post pandemic? What do you see for the developing and the developed markets going forward?
So they call, of course, this the new normal. Yeah, we've changed. We've got to reset the button almost. So I don't think we'll go back to what we were like before. That's the first thing. I think the use of technology and things like telemedicine are now here to stay. Yeah, we've made that big move, and now healthcare is going to be different. The environment going forward. What I think will happen going forward is we'll start really thinking about how we innovate, how we break some of the barriers,
Mhm.
and how we recreate and distribute healthcare more fairly. So, for example, a lot of money resources have been into secondary care or tertiary care. Actually, what requires more resources is primary care, prevention, well-being, to prevent the sick care and promoting the well care, which is much more cost-effective. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think we'll see a redistribution of that. I think data will be very important. So we'll get data-driven healthcare. People want personalized medicine. They want access to healthcare. They want it, which is happening. Also, that's driven more about being more precise, where data becomes the key. And I think next 5 years we'll see that. terms of global workforce, we've seen a lot of stuff happening globally. One of the things that we don't do as much is learn from other countries. So I spent a lot of time in China and other places. There's great models of healthcare, great things we can learn from. In China, for example, you can go there and they have hospitals with 10,000 beds. You can't imagine, right?
Yeah.
In the morning, they may have 10,000 appointments for ophthalmology, eye tests, and they manage big populations efficiently. So what's there to learn from that? Is there what can we learn? Their telemedicine platform, Ping An, has 300 million users a year ago. It's
Wow.
probably double that now. They perform about 6 months ago about 160,000 consultations per day. Imagine what's like that now with
Wow.
pandemic. So what can you learn from their experiences? Go to
Mm-hmm.
India. Similarly, you have rural parts of India which are really difficult to get to. Now using smartphones, using telephone triage, using maybe some telemedicine, yeah, or remote apps that might work for them to manage their public health, for example. So I think what we're seeing is this kind of convergence, as I said before. There's more utilization. People are getting better healthcare than they were better than before. It's learning from experiences around the world about what works best. And I would say, let's learn from other countries. What are they doing that's better than ours? Yeah, how are they managing, say, treatments? Let's take an example. In the US, a cardiac operation, a cardiac bypass, Raphael, costs upwards of £100,000, maybe £200,000 dollars. Yeah,
Yes.
$100,000 or $200,000. Quite expensive, right? For a
Yes.
cardiac bypass operation. That same operation, if you go to a unit in India, in Bangalore, called the Narayan Hospitals, run by a guy called Dr. Shetty, that same operation costs $1,500. They've taken
Wow.
on expenses. So how have they managed to do this? Still safely,
Yeah.
still good results. What's it to learn? Yeah, you don't have to be charged $200,000 for an operation. Yeah, that's just a lot of waste, a lot of money gone into a system
Mm-hmm.
rather than actual delivery of healthcare. So these are things I think we can learn from one another. Yeah, both may not be ideal. Some in the middle might be the perfect model, for example. Yeah, take bits and elements of one, elements of the other, and recreate. So I really think there's shared learning here. Whether it's a conflict zone, whether it's from a poor area or a first world country, there's common shared experiences. And what digital has done, the digital transformation, has connected that world much better. We're learning, and some of these countries can leapfrog others by redesigning healthcare, right? So I was involved in Bolivia. I was invited to Bolivia over the last few years
Oh,
and
yeah.
to help support a new hospital, to
Mm-hmm.
build a new digital hospital. And what they're saying, let's leapfrog, let's not learn from other people, let's look at our own healthcare services, our own population. We want to create that future proof for us. Let's leapfrog and use technology to enhance their care of our population. So countries now will take that initiative, leapfrog, think, redesign, reimagine, and we'll unleash this kind of huge potential in the human, I guess, construct and aspiration. They can actually rethink models rather than take things that are not working or broken clearly.
Thank you. That's I remember the Bolivia video. I watched it on YouTube. It was quite the experience. I recommend everyone to watch that. Yeah, it's something that I wish I don't I recommend that for not only just the medicine, the medical space. I apply that to even my personal life. That we have lots of solutions within us, and also at the same time I learn from other people, and that's one reason why I do this podcast. I gain from shared experiences.
Yeah.
I always like talking to people from everywhere, and and I don't enjoy being an island unto myself because people learn from me and I learn from others, and it makes me a better person. And I hope I can impact that onto my child too. And even when things have been dark for me, there's always been someone who I met who I never knew, and I said something. The person was like, "Wow, I never thought about that." And where did you learn that from? I said, "Oh, it's a common thing I used to do when I was in Nigeria. I was almost homeless then, but I did this." And I was like, "Wow, thank you for doing that, and you made my day." Oh, okay. I was like, I never knew that could help somebody. Yeah, so I guess that helped somebody, and I just felt good for doing that. And then before I know, someone did something for me too, and I helped someone too. And just from that, a little circle of, joy kind of grew. And, and that's just on the personal level, and how much more at the national level. You see, countries can help other countries, but we need to learn and look. Don't, there's a story that we had as kids about it, a man who claimed he was going to gather all the wisdom in the world, and he gathered all the wisdom in the world, and he put it in a calabash, which is like a little kind of pot looking like wooden pot looking like item. And he claimed he had gone around the world, got all the wisdom in it, and he tried to climb a tree to hide the calabash. And now, if you're climbing a tree with a calabash, you're supposed to hang it on your back. You tie it with a string and hang it on your back if you're climbing a tree. But he was climbing the tree and he hung the calabash on his stomach. So he was having problems climbing the tree. He was struggling.
Mm.
So a kid was walking by and said, "What are you doing? That's not you climb a tree with a calabash. You should hang it on your back. You don't know how to climb a tree with a calabash." And the kid said it in a joking manner and walked away. And the man thought about it and was like, "Wow, I had all the wisdom in the world, and a child still had to correct me." So he got mad and like smashed the calabash. So apparently he still had a lot to learn. That's what he took from it. Which, as children, we didn't really get the memo, but it was clear that you can't really claim you know everything. There's still
Yeah,
stuff to learn. So be open to learning, and I think that's one thing we should take from this pandemic. So I think that would be a good place for us to end. We'll definitely
mhm,
have a part 2 in the future.
sure.
Maybe post pandemic, if you're in town, definitely have to catch up. Or we'll arrange another um, tele recording again. It's
Great.
been a pleasure having you. So there's a final question I have to ask, which I always ask all my guests. So, one word of advice you would like to leave the audience with, could be a quote, could be a mantra that you live by, or just something you want to leave the audience with. Just it could be a line from one of your favorite songs, but just something you like to leave the audience with. You know, just from you.
Sure. So my question really to the audience and my advice is, um, what is it that you want to be remembered for? What's that legacy you'd like to leave behind? We're all on this planet for a period of time, some shorter than others, but it's inevitable that we'll always pass the earth at some stage. So you've got to look back on your career and say, okay, what's the impact I have for society? Have I done the right things? Have I made an impact? Have I tried to help support people? Whether you're a doctor, engineer, whether you're an accountant, whether you're cleaning your work, it doesn't matter. What's that you plan to leave behind? Goodness, some knowledge that you share with other people, and also to make society a better place for all of us. And that's all that we're here for. Nothing else. It's quite simple. Nothing else becomes superfluous. And also, don't be afraid to dream high. Look at me. I've come from a really humble background. I'm travelled from a country. I was born in a village, for example, in Sylhet, Bangladesh, where we had no running water, no electricity, for example, right? And now here I'm talking to the world about technology, innovation, and being a surgeon involved with cancer surgery. Who would have thought that journey would have taken place? It's not by design, it's just by hard work, prayers, and also making sure that you're able to compete at a very high level and pushing and your passion to the best of your ability. So if I can get to this stage in my life, it can be true for anybody. I'm no different or no special than anybody else. I've been lucky to have the right opportunities. And I hope other people also share and be inspired by my story throughout this podcast.
Thank you for that, Shafi. Do you have any plugins that you would like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, no, so you can look at me through my LinkedIn profile, Twitter handle is at Shafi Ahmed 5, Instagram, they call me the virtual surgeon. So whenever you say virtual surgeon, you find me. I have a YouTube channel. Just follow my work. I give a lot of talks around the world. I've given over 200 keynotes. If you're ever in town where I'm talking, come say hello. Otherwise, watch my videos. There's lots available. And my personal website is www.surgeon.ai or professorshafiahmed.com. They're both the same website where you see all my stuff I've been doing, and feel free to send me a message or get in contact for any reason.
Alrighty. I'll have all those listed with the show notes. And can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure hearing from you.
Thank you
And
so much,
yeah,
Rafael.
we'll be in touch. And thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. Looking forward to seeing you all at the next episode. And don't forget to share with your friends and loved ones. And come back again. Thanks for listening to White Label American. If you enjoyed the show, we'll appreciate if you rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. If you have any questions, comments, or have someone who will be a good guest on the show, or you want to be on the show, send us a message at whitelabelamerican@gmail.com. And make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at White Label American. Thank you for your support.